Hey,
Hi!
how's it
How are
going?
you? Melinda?
Thank
Tell
you.
us
Thank
a
you.
little bit about yourself.
So I'm Melinda Wilson. I'm the owner of Emerge Physiotherapy. So I have my space here in Ancaster. I'm at the 30-minute hit gym space in Ancaster, and then I have my little private clinic off to the side here. And then I also work in Burlington on Fridays. So I'm a pelvic floor physiotherapist for adults and pediatric patients. So what that means is, yes, I'm like a traditional physio, but I've done additional training in order to be able to help people with any kind of conditions to do with their pelvic floors. Okay, so that could kind of run a lot of different things, but sort of the more common stuff I would see with adults tend to be incontinence, which is leaking that you don't really want to have happen, leaking, like urinary incontinence or fecal incontinence. Pain, like painful intercourse or pelvic pain or back pain or hip pain that kind of is unresolved. A lot of times that can be coming from the pelvic floor if you've had these kind of long-standing issues that are not getting better with the kind of the traditional rehab type of care, then sometimes it's actually being driven by that pelvic floor. So I was fortunate enough to go to McMaster for my master's in physiotherapy, and they have a fantastic program there. And in Canada, our physio programs are stellar. But the pelvic floor was not really something that was covered in physio school, and rightfully so. Like, it may not necessarily be appropriate in like an untrained student setting, and not everyone wants to go on in that field. So, spending a lot of time on that doesn't make a lot of sense. But as soon as I started working in general physiotherapy, I right away noticed that there was a gap in my knowledge, that there would be people coming in with back pain, with hip pain, or for other things, but they would also tell me that they had incontinence or that they had painful sex or anything along those lines. And I'm not a person who likes having a gap in my knowledge.
No,
A little bit not my favorite. And it was something that was clearly for me, it sort of was something that just always was there as a theme for me in my first years out of school. So then I decided to try the extra training and just kind of see how it went. And I just absolutely fell in love with it. I just, I already liked my job, but now I'm like so excited. I have to like at things like this, when I do a talk, I have to take a breath,
breathe, it's fine.
A little bit. I'm a little too excited. But so that's kind of how I feel about it now. So I'm going to grab my pelvis here. I've got my fun little bony pelvis model, and I find it's, especially over video, a little easier to explain what the pelvic floor looks like when there's something for you to be looking at. Okay, so this is a human pelvis here. So this is, if I'm holding it up to my own body, it kind of lines up with my low back, and then you can, when you feel this kind of bony prominence just below your waist, that's the top of the bone here. The pelvic floor is the bottom of the pelvis. So it's kind of like a hammock of muscle. So I'm going to lie this body down on its back. Now, this model has a vagina, but for bodies without a vagina, it's, from a muscular standpoint, not a whole lot different. It really isn't. So if your body does not have a vagina, then it's just this muscle group down the middle is a little narrower. Gotcha. And sometimes the pelvis is a little bit narrower from a muscular standpoint. The muscle group starts at your pubic bone at the front, which is kind of that bony prominence you can feel at the front, and runs all the way to your tailbone at the back. Okay. What you can see is that as you're tipping forward, now looking inside the pelvis, you can see that there's a lot of items in there. A lot of friends in there. And we've got, so in this body, there's a uterus, and we've got a bladder, which is kind of tucked ahead and under of the uterus, and then we've got a bowel at the back here.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
In other bodies, you'd just be dealing with, if you don't have a uterus, some bodies will also have a prostate. So a prostate would be attached underneath the bladder around the urethra. So it's kind of like the urethra and the prostate are one ball. So that the pelvic floor, like if you look at this, there's nothing else there. There's no bone here.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a muscle bowl that really has to support all of these organs.
Wow.
Never mind if there's a baby in there.
Right.
Never mind if your bowels are really full because you're constipated, or anything along those lines. So it's quite a heavy load for those muscles to just be holding up against gravity. Like as soon as you're upright, the muscles are responsible for holding those organs against gravity. Okay?
Wow, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, because you'd think there'd be more. Yes, there's suspensory ligaments. We have ligaments inside of us that hold these things up.
Right.
But really, the muscle group is doing the lion's share there too.
Wow.
Okay, and so then rule number 2 of the pelvic floor is to act like a sphincter. So if you can see on this model, you can kind of see how the muscle kind of is like a little donut around each opening.
Right.
So at each one of these openings, you can preferentially squeeze in order to not have things come out, whether it's urine, whether it's your stool, or whether if you have a bit of prolapse or anything, holding things up vaginally. So continence, or the maintaining control over your fluids and your bowel movements, is a job that's performed by the pelvic floor as well. And then another rule number 3, is again these attachment sites. We've got attachment of the 2 sides of the pubic bowl here, the pelvic bowl, sorry,
right,
and the attachment here on the back side at the tailbone. And we have muscles coming out towards the sit bones, and there's additional muscles going out to the hips. That means the pelvic floor performs a role with supporting your pelvis, with supporting your spine, and with supporting your hips.
So a lot of your, like, the patients that you have, like, do they come in with, like, lower back pain? Do you see that a lot?
I do see that. Yes, I do see that very frequently. I would say that most people come in with the back pain when they've also got another symptom related to the pelvic floor, and then they the light bulb goes on, and either their physician or their general physio. So if they're at seeing a physiotherapist who does orthopedic care, and the physio's kind of going, this isn't responding the way I would expect. This is kind of, and then they might question them further. Are your hips bugging you? Are you having leaking? Are you having painful sex? Any of those things. And if any of those things are positive, then that's when I usually hear from my colleagues around town, oh, can you help me with Janet? Janet needs help. And so I'll just fix up the pelvic floor stuff with Janet, and then send Janet back to the regular physio clinic to deal with whatever the other issue was.
So what do you think the most important thing that everyone can do to, like, maintain pelvic health?
If I were to pick the most important thing that I noticed kind of up until very recently, up until everyone's been at home more, the most important thing I would say is taking the time to listen to your body. And what I mean by that is, so many jobs, for example, a nurse who might be working a 12-hour shift, or a teacher who may only have one staff bathroom and can't get there all the time, our lifestyles can often cause us to be out of sync with our pelvic floor and bladder and bowels.
Gotcha.
So I find a lot of people have learned over time to ignore their bladders, and cause issues to occur. So either like kind of overfilling, and then only learning to feel it when it's excessively full, or ignoring it because they're afraid of leaking and just peeing even though they don't really need to pee.
Right.
So if I were to say anything, it would be about once a month to check in on yourself with respect to how often are you going to the bathroom? Also, are you going to the bathroom just because that's the time you usually go, or are you going because you really need to go?
Right. Is there any way that we can support you? Do you have a website?
Yes.
Or
yes, I do. Yeah, so my website's emergephysio.ca. And my handle here on Instagram is at Emerge Physiotherapy, and my Facebook is at Emerge Physio. So, you know, certainly if you have questions for me, I love getting questions, but if you need to book with me, I do have an online booking site. So you on my website, emergephysio.ca. You can book through there, but otherwise just send your questions my way.
Well, thank you so much for being a part of the festival. We're so glad to have you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. This has been wonderful.
Awesome. Thank you, Melinda.
You're welcome. Bye now.
Take care.